Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Christian Plogfors and Carl Niblaeus, the game designers behind Death in Space, a sci-fi tabletop role-playing game that takes you to the grimy, blue-collared future of a universe filled with risk, but also opportunity. Death in Space presents a vision of space where technology is broken and dirty, and society is harsh and desperate. The player characters make up a crew with their own spacecraft or station, and take on jobs they can find in order to earn some well-needed bucks, and to get ahead in the power struggles of the stellar system. Most of all, Death in Space is about surviving in an abandoned frontier system, where resources are scarce and competition is fierce. It was an absolute joy to interview Christian and Carl about Death in Space, and honestly, I can't wait to play my first game of it, so please, if you haven't checked it out, go and check it out right now. Death in Space comes out at the end of April and is currently available for pre-order on the Free League website. I'll put links to that and to Christian and Carl's other projects on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. So could you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Carl Niblaeus, or Kalle in Swedish. You can call me Carl. I'm kind of a physicist turned data scientist these days with a lifelong interest in tabletop role-playing games. And that's kind of my main hobby, I would say, not very surprisingly. During the days, I try to analyze a lot of data for a kind of audio/ebook subscription company. And in the evenings, I work hard on Death in Space, basically.
And me, Christian Plogfors. What am I? I'm a computer nerd, I guess. Work with computer games, and I've been making maps and levels for computer games, and that's kind of where it all started for me, with role-playing games and maps and tables and all that. So that's pretty much what I've been doing all my life, except from a break from role-playing games, I think maybe 20 years something, and then I found it again and actually realized how fun it is to play and to make stuff for it, and how easy it is when you can just write and imagine stuff instead of having big budgets with computer game budgets and stuff like that. So it is pretty nice to do something a bit more low-key, maybe. That's my life, and I work with Death in Space all the time. I think it's all the time for 2 years now, every day. So that's and if I don't write on Death in Space, it's kind of listening on music and stuff like that. So that's taking walks in the forest, screaming at the space. I don't know.
I was about to say, that sounds like the dream, and then you said screaming at space, and I was like, okay, I'll retract that a little bit. Both of you have sort of mentioned there that you both have been influenced or have, regular role players, and even you say, Christine, that people haven't had a break yourself for 20 years. What got you into doing role-playing games in general? And if you did have a break, why was that, do you think?
For me, it was because of the C64 computer. When I got that at home, I couldn't stop using that, so I kind of left the pen and paper stuff. And I think it was when a friend wanted to play some role-playing games. And then I found that feeling you got when you were young and actually was playing, and you had that when you have so fun with your friends and you imagine stuff and you're sitting around the table and you get that kind of magical flow when you talk to each other and just laughing and screaming at each other. It's just pure fun. So then I couldn't stop. We needed to keep on playing, and after a while you started want to change stuff with the rules, and after that can't stop.
I would say for me, I didn't really have a break, but I had kind of a long period where I didn't have so much fun with role-playing games. I had my old group that I had always played with, but we had kind of different priorities. People getting in their 20s, moving away to study, and I was a bit frustrated that people didn't want to play as much as I wanted to, or things like that.
Feeling,
So So about 10 years ago or something, I started looking for other people and exploring kind of the world of role-playing games a lot more, reading a lot more games and just finding more people to play with and seeing how other people handled the games.
Would you say you're both more players or GMs or a bit of both?
For me, it started as a player. I'm really new being a GM. But when I started, I couldn't stop because it was just like how I was making games. I mean,
right.
You had to create so much like worlds and stories, and I kind of have a hard time to go back now. To be a player again. There are some GMs that I like to play with, so I always try to play with them. But it's so fun to be a GM for your friends. I think I prefer being a GM.
I kind of gone the other way around. I was this kind of constant GM in my old group. And then when I found other people, I started being more the player. Kind of seeing how other people GM'd was really interesting, actually. I also played quite a lot of these kind of GM-less or GM-full games, which was also really interesting to just think about the various roles you can have around the table with.
Yeah, GM-less games really sort of change that dynamic. That it's not one person, because I always think that the GM is a player as well. They have the final say on stuff. But then a GM-less one, it just sort of, I don't know, it just it's just that change in status where then everyone's on the same level. And I don't know, it's a weird respect thing as well. There's so much value in GM-less games. And they're so, like you said, they're so much fun and so different. But it does. I always takes that one person to go, shall we try this? And then someone reads that report, and they are GM, but also they're a player. So
yeah.
It's a bit.
I think I've been inspired quite a lot by these types of games. That I kind of want to flatten the hierarchy and the traditional around the gaming table in the traditional world of role-playing games. So kind of make sure that everyone participates more on the same level. And that you're not kind of expecting someone, the GM, to do a lot more, or as a player also have the kind of the possibility to add things and kind of help shape the world.
To be honest, I think it's easier to be a GM because, at least in my groups, because you just say something and they just take that and run with it, and then you just point in that direction.
I guess the hard thing is when they don't.
Yeah.
If you go to a con, it's a bit harder to play.
Yeah, I've done a bit of that too. Yeah, that's a different experience, definitely.
So what kind of games are you two sort of really into? Obviously, I know we'll come on to Death and Space in a second, but like, what are games that make you go, oh, that was such a good story? Like, like obviously we talked a bit about GM-less games, but is there a particular genre or a particular rule system that you both like?
I'm a bit all over the place, I think. I like when games have kind of a design idea and that they kind of, there's something else than just a bunch of put together rules. When there's some kind of design idea that someone has wanted to explore. But I would say I'm mainly into rules light games. That's kind of the overarching theme for me. That it's I don't like when there's a lot of rules. I like to have kind of a more free conversation around the table and not have to kind of go back and forth between pages of rules and look at that. But it could be, in terms of themes, it could be anything from adventure-focused dungeon crawling to, more drama-focused story games. Although I would say it's mainly the kind of adventure, dungeon crawl, OSR kind of games that I'm following or kind of interested in today. But I try to kind of keep up with what's going on in the scene in general.
And I guess for me it's almost the same, but sometimes I like those really, really crunchy games also when you have to sit with numbers and figure out stuff, but not when I'm a GM. Then it's just enough to have a story. But all games where the rules is not in the way of having fun. Maybe that's more of player style when you ask questions to the players. That's also, but simple mechanics and is always nice.
I just want to pick up on what you just said there, like asking questions of the players and stuff. I do this rule when I'm running an adventure, when we're starting out to get them sort of engaged. I always like, it's usually they're on a boat somewhere. I don't know, because I just don't want it to be in a tavern, right? And I'll ask them, what's one thing you notice whilst you're on this journey? And I have to put in the caveat, said that's not going to disrupt the journey, but it's something that you've noticed. And it was just really interesting because then we could build up the world around it. It was very sort of sparse painting, but certainly the game I got introduced to this idea in, it was a Call of Cthulhu game. And it's just the idea we could literally put in little bits of tropes, a little bit of horror stuff, which was just, you know, in a horror game, you're like, these things are building attention, but they're not the story. You know, you're not like, what's behind this tree or something like that. But it could be like, oh, you realize that this flower, it's yellow, and suddenly there's more and more yellow throughout the whole forest and all that sort of thing. And it's just, I always like asking questions of players to add that little bit of narrative or a little bit of flavor and stuff, because then they are suddenly sort of invested in like, oh, well, if this is true, what else is true? And I just build up on it. But I have had to put in the caveat that it doesn't change where they're going, because that happens all the time. They're like, there's a big storm, and I go, no, there's that back and forth. Obviously, you both have sort of contributed to making Death in Space. Let's just talk about Death in Space then. So if people have been living under a rock, what is Death in Space, and how does it stand out from other tabletop RPGs out there?
$1 million question.
Yes.
I think its main thing is probably the setting of the world and how it's connected. Well, the setting, that's the main thing that stands out. Yeah,
but it's kind of a game where we try to, as you say, get the setting to reverberate through everything in the book. So we kind of everywhere where we can, we try to use the important parts of the setting to kind of inspire the table entries or gear lists or things like that. That's something we worked a lot with, at least. What makes it stand out, I mean, I guess just how the book looks is visually is a bit different than many other games. And on the inside is kind of a rule engine, which is simple D20 OSR similar system, but with maybe a little bit more than the lightest versions of those games.
That's the thing. We want to find a space, no pun intended, that we are alone. I don't mean that in a unique way, but more like the amount of setting and rules and everything we do. We're trying to find something between the games that are out there. And maybe some people don't see that, or maybe people see that, but that's how we feel for the game, at least, that we're trying to make something light and then go to the edge of being too much and then go back a bit.
Too much is probably not so much for a lot of people, by the way.
For us.
Again, for me, reading through your book, again, as you sort of said, obviously the book itself is visually stunning and it will definitely check out. But I think for me, like you sort of touched on it a little bit, the idea of loneliness, the way it's sort of portrayed throughout, and you feel that with every page, this idea that, you know, when you're talking about sci-fi games in general, you know, you think, oh, alien battles, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek, that sort of thing. And now you sort of, it feels like it's a dystopian in space, that sort of thing, where everything is gone to shit. And slowly the world is breaking around you. And you're just basically, you're playing these characters who are just clinging and just trying to survive and to get through. And I think comes across in every single page you guys have done. I know you've drawn lots of inspiration from various films and stuff, but there definitely is that sense of the alienness of it. Obviously, I know we might talk about the void point system and all the ideas of sort of mutation stuff. It just feels that sort of, it goes beyond, for me, beyond the sci-fi japes of, say, Doctor Who or Star Trek. You know, there is places for that sort of thing, I would say, but there's definitely a sense of like, this is beyond. Even so, it's not even, I wouldn't even say it was horror. It's that sort of thing, like 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think I did that bit at the end where it's just like, these things are so big and it's awe-inspiring, but it's terrifying. But there's this all these emotions or something. And I felt that a lot reading about sort of the void itself and this, you know, this decaying system and stuff. And I just thought it was such a powerful thing. I've not come across a sci-fi setting like it is like around that thing. So kudos, amazing.
All right. But nice to hear. But it's that, sounds very much like what we actually had.
Well, yeah, like you said, and I really appreciate that you were saying that. Yeah, it's a rules light OSR kind of game, but with a very heavy setting, and it allows you to do that narrative story thing. And I think that's so important for nowadays when we are writing writing RPGs, but also playing RPGs. I think a lot of people want to have the ability to tell these stories. And you're right, there are places to have that sort of the crunchy number stuff, but sometimes people just want to tell a story about loss and hopelessness and the void. And so, yeah, that's what I got across from
I
Death in
think
Space.
I don't think it's a secret, but we have, at least I have had a core in the game, and that's everything is chaos in the whole world, and you have one thing, and that's your family. That's your crew, and the people around your table, and you're trying to survive. So that pretty much a core we had when we made the game. That's why the first adventure in the book is not about monsters. It's not about combat in that way. It's more about tension and more about the thing with relationships and lost friends. I'm happy that you can see that in the book.
yeah. And what I think is interesting as well, you've got the character creation, and then you've got sort of the spacecraft or space hub creation as well. And I loved how, again, you sort of talked about it, this idea of like, you want to do exploring and there's political intrigue and stuff. Yes, I mean, you know, spacecraft makes sense because you're zipping around, but the idea that if you want to do more social stuff, like a hub, that is also a valid option. And so I actually, it made me think about, again, going back to my Star Trek analogy, but obviously like Deep Space Nine, they're just, you know, it's just a big space station and all the stuff happens there. You know, again, it's like talking with your players, like, what do they want out of this? It's such an interesting system that you can have these stories. You can have the, you know, you've got this backstory of the Gem War and all that sort of thing happening. And do you want to be big players in this thing, or do you want to actually play the other people with have the conflict still in the background? So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And having, so again, not many, I know there's a couple of games that do that sort of, what's the word, the hideout creation where they, you know, that's their space and build it up from there. And I quite like that as a, because again, I don't think I've seen that with a space or a sci-fi theme per se. So I thought that was
maybe not.
So
that could be like, yeah, it's a little bit inspired by, for me at least, by this game by Free League called Mutant Year Zero, where you have this arc where your mutants live, but a lot of other mutants live in this arc as well. And there are, you know, lots of hierarchies and people you have to do a favor for this guy and to make sure that you're not getting in the way of something, or this kind of social intrigue and drama. That's something that I wanted to have also in this game. Maybe you're translating that to being in a colony somewhere on a far off planet, or and that colony is basically where you're spending most of the time, but you have your own little part of this colony, which is your hub, and you have to kind of fight, or maybe not fight, but discuss and socially at least fight with all the people who run this colony and what they want and what you want, and that kind of scenario.
You can't escape your problems. That's with the station. You're stuck there.
You can't choose your family, right? That's
so that's true.
When you were obviously creating this book and coming up with the things up from sort of obviously initial pitch to sort of the end, obviously I know with the Kickstarter and stuff, for both of you, what was the favorite part of it? I know there's always obstacles, there's always writer's block and, you know, not getting there, but what was your favorite part of creating Death in Space?
Oh, that's
hard question.
You can't say all of it because that's a cheating answer.
No, I would definitely not say all of it.
It has been a lot of struggle, but that's also the thing. I mean, it should be a struggle.
No, absolutely. I think holding the book in my hand, and that was, of course, a really big feeling and a very nice feeling. Flicking through the pages and seeing this holographic foil on the outside. I mean, that was a really nice feeling. But also just kind of, you know, when you're done with the project. So done for us was kind of when we sent it off to the printer, because after that, the interior of the book at least couldn't be changed so much. So that was also a really nice feeling, like when you're kind of nailed down, this is the text and this is how it's going to be. And let's just sit back and feel good about that, basically. That was also a nice feeling, I would say. So basically being done with things.
Being done with it. Okay, cool.
No, it's there are some other parts as well in the process itself that were nice, of course.
I mean, the most fun for me is it's actually escaping into the world. When you're writing it and you start adding some pillars that actually make sense, and then you can escape yourself in it. It feels really nice to understand it, and you reach that point where everything's starting to make sense. So that's a point in the project where I actually had the most fun, when you can't stop, right? Everything just feels so good.
We had a couple of these kind of aha moments where we think of something in the setting or in the rule mechanics or some kind of table, or I don't know, different pieces of the book where we just kind of realized that, wow, this is a great idea. Let's go for this.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice feeling when you just kind of, when
it just all sort of clicks and you're like, this
exactly. When you're in the zone and you're not just kind of constantly doubting whether things are what you want them to be or not.
Actually, from the beginning of Death in Space, I sat on the train to work like 40 minutes every day, and I told myself I need to write every day, even if I don't want to. And when you reach that point, when you write and you start to actually get that flow, and it feels, you get so happy and you get so inspired, and then you need to go off and go to work. So you can't, that nice feeling in the end there where that was really fun also in the beginning of the project.
I would say one thing that we didn't mention, of course, is this Kickstarter project that really flew off a lot more than we had expected.
Yeah.
That was a kind of a very big experience. It's scary, but also really, really, I don't know what the right word is, but we were really kind of humbled and happy that so many people wanted to support this project. That was a really special and nice feeling, actually.
And that's why it's so nice when people get the book now.
Yes.
Yeah.
They read it and they like it, some people. So that's nice. Because it feels when you back something, they don't know anything about the book, actually. So they're backing something that you can just see on the picture and trailer. So it's actually nice afterwards. Then I start believing about the Kickstarter instead of when it started. Because when it started, you're a bit, do they know what game it is? Or
it's like the backing, obviously, it's something like, oh, I really love this idea. I want this to happen. That's why I do. I mean, I know Kickstarter, sometimes people are like, oh, but I want a t-shirt or something like that. But I think ultimately, is that something when this sounds like an amazing thing and I want it to happen. And so, yeah, for Death in Space to just pretty much blow quite a lot of other, not all RPGs that are on Kickstarter get funded anymore. So there's a joy to see that as well. People do want this stuff. And it's like they want to be able to tell stories in this way, like what you said with the original setting and all that sort of thing, and people now creating modules and stuff on it. I'm sure you've got people saying, look, we've created this for the system and stuff.
Yeah, some stuff are starting to show up. Yeah. When
you're sort of talking about sort of the writing aspect of RPGs in general, thinking about Death in Space, where do you both look for inspiration for throughout this whole project? I know obviously you listed quite a few films and music and stuff like that in the book about it, but what was it that you were looking for when you were writing Death in Space? What was it that you sort of the genre you wanted to put across, or what do you want to communicate across, like the message, I guess?
One thing is, of course, to be kind of rooted in this 80s sci-fi kind of retro tech world. That's kind of the aesthetic, not really maybe the theme, but kind of the visuals, if you can say that in a text game. But then in terms of themes, I think we kind of get that from a little bit all over the place. So one thing is maybe Western movies, for me at least, the classics. I think we have a little bit different inspirations.
Lots of music. But it's not hard to find inspiration when there's a pandemic and you're kind of alone at home and writing about being alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Western part that's the same thing for me. But we wanted some kind of contrast between. I don't want to use that space is boring, but it's slow and lonely.
Exactly, slow and big, and kind of everything takes time. And I think for my part, of course, I've been inspired by actual space, which is big and quite boring in many ways, but also has some really, from our perspective, exotic places out there, like planets made out of diamond. I think we both spent a lot of time on like the NASA, or not only NASA, but like exoplanet surveys and things like that, just trying to get inspired from how crazy our own universe can be.
I love that you describe space as boring, like because it's true when you read Death in Space. That because I know you have tables about the length of time it takes to travel across to different regions and stuff like that. These things take time.
That's kind of adapted a little bit maybe to what's possible in terms of game.
But I think that's really interesting, right? Because again, that when people think of sci-fi, they're like, oh yeah, lasers, beating the aliens back, it is the Marines coming to save us, etc. And it's not like that. It's like that idealistic versus reality. And actually, I hadn't really considered that. For a lot of the time, if you're traveling, it's boring. So I thought that's a very good point. I hadn't considered that. Playing games about waiting or trying to get somewhere slowly and stuff like that. It's like almost like a play in a way, like a one-act play, and just like that's really fascinating. Using role-playing games to do that sort of thing and that waiting in time, because people don't like waiting, and again that idea of the tension building up between people and stuff like that. Interesting.
That is kind of like the 2001 inspiration as well, which is kind of
exactly.
So slow. Everything is very slow in that movie.
But one thing is important, and that's contrast. After something slow, it's nice to have some a bit tempo or something to change it. And the same thing with if you have something with lots of using your social skills at the table, it's nice to break that off with something like combat or some call in a dungeon or whatever like that. I like that contrast to mix with everything, and
that's true. Although it's nice to play like a meditation role-playing games as well. There are some out there, but it's also nice to have some kind of adventure contrast to it.
And that's what Death in Space does, right? Like you said, you've got the combat obviously between player combat and then also spacecraft combat as well. And so that's interesting as well, just how that works as well, because you could, like you said, you could be like, okay, we're just going to do this sort of the social bit on the hub, but also we could just go out and I think it's a sign of a good system that you can be that flexible and put those things in. So, and also the combat is very succinct, I will say, thank God, because I know from playing other things when you're in spacecraft, sometimes you're just like, oh God, whereas I think you guys just was like, it's simple, just don't worry about it.
That was something we worked a lot with, actually. It's part of the system.
There's another thing with that, with a slow space, going through spaces, when we both realize that when you're away from your home or from something for 20 years because of prior sleep, and then you're coming back, or maybe 100 years, what happened after that? I mean, everything has changed. You almost, all your friends could be dead, all your family, everything has changed. So, and when we realized that could start building on top of that we had unions that wanted to stop that people are losing their lives because of long traveling, and
Again, we've sort of mentioned it a little bit, but so obviously one of the big highlights of the book is that it's got so much beautiful art pieces, and the way it's laid out is, again, you were sort of saying that sort of very sort of reminiscent of sort of the 80s sort of aliens sort of graphics and sort of the topography, sort of cartography even. Do you have a particular favorite bit or like an art piece of the book, or is it like choosing like one of your children and you're like, no, it's all great?
The cover, I like the cover.
Okay, go for the easy answer. Okay.
But it is
a great cover.
But and the spread with actually the system, because it has so much stuff. We have some companies, we have unions, and you see all the planets, and we know what's on the planets, so that's nice to see.
Yeah, maps are always evoking a lot of ideas. But otherwise, I mean, I'm really happy with some of the art we got from Matthias, for example, one of the artists, like the one on page 110, so this Epoch Spaceport, which was really mind-blowing when I saw it the first time. It's so much, it has so much detail, it's
gorgeous. Yeah, that's
really
that's the sort of thing you'd have on a background or even like a poster somewhere. It's such an incredible, it's so detailed and designed, and it's the white against the black. It's just incredible.
Yeah, we talked to Matthias, and he got the setting directly.
Yeah. Yes.
It was so nice to see something, and it was just spot on what we wanted. Really nice to work with those artists that actually understand how we want it to be.
Instantly, the artists just sort of get it. That's when you're like, yes, your setting and system is strong enough that they've just taken it and run with it and created beautiful art with it. This is always good. What would you say is your sort of big tip or sort of main advice to any GM who's about to start running Death in Space for the first time?
I would say that first start with reading the rules. That's
always good. Yeah.
and ask questions. Let them be a part of creating the character, because everybody likes that, and the spacecraft or space station. So they get involved. What's important in the game, and
the players. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then to have fun before our rules. Our rules is just there for the setting and for the game, so you can play, but you should never be afraid to just do something else instead because you like it.
Kind of read the rules, but maybe don't
ignore them.
Have to follow them dogmatic. Read the rules and break them. I would say we have a couple of principles that we like about the setting that we feel are kind of important part of the setting. Yes. If you want to follow those, so remember to convey that things are broken, that there's recently been a war actually in this stellar system, and as we have talked about, traveling takes time and things like this.
I really like those principles because they are almost like a primer and anything. If you weren't sure, if you knew the system but you were about to go in and stuff like that, I think each of them are just very valuable because they just encapture that original setting so well. I like this idea that everything is recycled, nothing is new, and the gem war and stuff like that. I thought they were really good. Yeah. There's
one question. I mean, something I need to tell your players before you play Death in Space, that they should be careful. It's deadly.
That's it. It's deadly. It's Death in Space. And space is boring. So be careful.
Space doesn't care about you.
It's very true.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, brutal. Obviously, you've both created an amazing book that's about to come out, and you've worked so hard on it. What do you think now? Because obviously you've worked on this for so long, over the last 2 years. What do you think the tabletop RPG scene for you guys will look like in sort of 10 years' time? Are you seeing any particular trends, or are you just happy to just be a part of it?
Difficult question.
Yes, I know.
When you're kind of in the middle of it. I think a lot has happened in the last 10 years. So 10 years ago, I was all about getting into the OSR. Today, the OSR is kind of branched out into a lot of different things, and I'm not sure it even exists anymore. So that's probably going to continue.
Probably nothing will change for me because nothing has changed for 30 years when I started. I think I started when I was 10, and I still like exactly the same thing, both with my friends, and I still like making tables, writing, making worlds. And I actually went back to my old stuff when I was 10. The thing is, I don't like war, but I actually like painting guns. It's fun to make something that's square, and I understand it, and it's something I always done when I was little. I did it, and I still like it.
I would guess that in 10 years, we already see that people are starting to make online tools to help you in your gaming, and that will probably continue. But I have a feeling that some people will kind of stick to pen and paper and print, and I was kind of all into using a computer all the time at the gaming table, but now I've kind of gone away from that because I don't like the mindset I get into. I find it easier to focus on the game when I only have a couple of papers in front of me and a book. Maybe there will be this kind of counter culture.
Ooh, like a renaissance back to pen and paper. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, well,
a lot of the people in this scene also really like printed stuff, because they like the feeling of holding something nice, printed, designed in your hand.
I definitely see that as well. Yeah, everyone funded the Kickstarter, but they didn't all pick PDFs. They want the actual.
No, exactly.
Hold,
yeah.
So I completely agree.
That's probably going to continue to kind of separate into two.
I definitely see that. Digital tools have been amazing and have opened up role playing stuff, but I think people do want to go back in person, and I do think it's something about having your phone at the table constantly can be a bit of a distraction, and like you said, you get into a different mindset and maybe you're not concentrating fully. I do think there's something joyous about just having a piece of paper, and then if you need to look something up, taking that moment to look through the book that is there, and especially if you're doing character creation as well, it's always I always think of it as a group thing, and certainly what you've done with Death in Space, that idea that you're doing this stuff and then you're creating stuff together. I like the idea that you're, again, in person. I know you can do this online as well, but there is something good about it.
Definitely online gaming will continue, and a lot of people really, really like that. I think more or less all of us probably tried it if we hadn't before already during the pandemic. So I did, and I think, most of us had to for some reason, because that was the only way.
The content will probably change also. I mean, there's more and more people that's joining, and you get more and more different kind of products. So you get this more diverse content that's for everybody. Because in the beginning it was mainly for certain people, nerdy people, and now it's starting to get a bit more open for everybody. So that's pretty nice to see more people that can join. So I hope we get even more stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess obviously Death in Space is going to be out soon. Do you have any other plans for the future? Any other projects in the work that you can talk about? I appreciate I asked that you've just finished a massive project, so instantly everyone's like, "What's happening next?" It's like, can you not just enjoy this? But do you have any plans that you can talk about, or any like RPG plans? Are you just going to try and just enjoy playing more now that you've got a little bit more free time, or are you just going to still keep writing on something?
I would probably at least play Death in Space. That's cool. We made it for us.
Yes.
We working on one adventure at least. I'm having fun with that, so hopefully we can release that soon. But it's so fun writing, so it will expand a bit. But and then we have some other plans. You actually said those plans before, Carl. But never mind. Maybe it's a secret. I don't know. About the system.
Right. Okay.
Now we can keep that.
I don't know if it's so secret, actually. Yeah, but doesn't matter.
Yeah. Very cryptic. Yes.
For both of us, I mean, I think we kind of have to keep writing stuff for the game, because we have so much so many ideas that we want to do something with. So I have like 3 or 4 parallel projects that are kind of not too far in the process yet, but I like to make like scenarios, so that's what I will probably focus on. But I also like kind of making tools, generators, things like that. I think it's quite hard to do them well, but I think they're very helpful as a GM. And when you play the game, to have these kind of tools to help you create locations, groups, scenarios.
The system we created, all the planets, they are made in a way so we can keep on building on it. So every time I see a planet, I want to make something for that planet. So I would like to do something for each planet, because I like all locations. And we have a planet called Amissa that's in the desert with a city in the desert there called the Block. And I really, really would like to write lots of stuff.
You have a couple of ideas for that particular place. That's true. Yeah.
And some things that is a bit different also. That's not about combat. So that's I'm looking forward for that.
That's
exciting. I like detective stories. So that would be nice.
Right. Yeah. Kind of noir detective. That's true. We've talked about that a lot.
That honestly sounds really exciting. I can't wait. We've got planned a Death in Space game very soon, so I'm really excited to play it and stuff. So thank you so much for joining me for this interview. Just my final question is, where can we find your work? If you're on social media, where can we find Death in Space? Where can we order it from?
Lots of places. You can find Death in Space in lots of places. So all the social media accounts, I guess. Death in Space RPG, I think, is the Instagram and Twitter as well. I think we're quite active on Instagram, or we try to be. We have a website where we post kind of the important news and things like that, deathinspace.com. And then you can order the game. Right now, you can pre-order it at Free League website, so freeleaguepublishing.com.
You can always just scream out in the space, and we will probably.
Oh my god! But what if something else screams back? That's not Death in Space.
We'll have to find out.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on an amazing book. I can't wait to play it, and I can't wait for other people to experience and read about it and just marvel about how beautiful it is. So thank you very much. I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in the future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.